What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Fierce Framework, where we talk about becoming fierce through messy action, baby steps, and cultivating our confidence. I'm your host, Mary Beth. I'm a self-diagnosed ADHD entrepreneur with a vision to see more women break out of the mold society tells us we're supposed to fit into and start living lives that we're excited about. My goal is to help other neurospicy entrepreneurs work sustainability and individuality into your business so that your business works for you and supports a life that lights you up. So I hope you find encouragement and inspiration in these episodes. Let's get into it. What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to talk all about rhythms and incorporating action towards our goals into our daily habits and into those routines. A lot of the time, I think we wait for a moment to take a big step or a big leap towards our goal, towards our dream, and we kind of were waiting for the right moment a lot of the time. But more often, in my experience, the way we get to our version of success is through consistent action, making progress towards those goals, slowly building up, turning those dreams into reality bit by bit by bit. And I think that's true because even a lot of the time when you look into like overnight successes, if you really dig into the story, you can see that there was preparation, there was a foundation being laid, there was work being done day in and day out, so that when that they met that opportunity, they were able to capitalize off it and actually use that to take that big leap towards their success. Whereas if they weren't making that progress day after day, if they weren't consistently taking action, putting themselves out there, doing the work, then they probably wouldn't have been as prepared and have not been able to get as much success out of that opportunity when they came across it. Right. So that's kind of my background, the context for where I'm coming from talking about this topic here, especially as an ADHDer. I think for me, it can be hard to do the kind of boring, mundane, repetitive things day in and day out, week in and week out, when I'm not seeing like a huge return. And I will say, like, speaking of being ADHD, right, that is probably one of the most frustrating things about baby steps. Because I know I talk about baby steps all the time. I'm a huge believer in baby steps. I'm a huge fan. They're like the only reason I've done anything in my life. But I can understand how they can be frustrating, right? Because it's like when you are taking small steps, your progress is slow. And you're looking back and it's like, okay, yesterday I took this baby step and now I'm only a baby step further than I was. And we want this payoff. We want that dopamine hit of like, oh, I did this big thing and then I got this big payoff. And so I can understand how it's so tempting to want to wait for that because I'm right there with you. However, in my experience, I haven't had a lot of opportunity to where I actually like take advantage of those situations, right? I'll wait for like the perfect day when I have a ton of time to, work on something and really dig into it. And I set all this time aside and, I've been waiting all week to work on it. And, maybe it's like Saturday afternoons, the day, and I'm gonna I don't know, plan all my content for the week and like record 8 videos and na. And then something always comes up, right? Or I'm just like not in the headset, I get like one video in and I'm like, I can't do this, bro. Like it's just not, the juices aren't flowing, the creativity is not there, or whatever it is, something's going on, or yeah, that's the day my webcam was being fixed. Like, like not literally, but it's like there's always something, right? So, what I've found in my experience is I've made so much more progress doing bit by bit by bit. And this is such a silly example, but I want to share it because it's real life and it's like so dramatic. I mean, let me just say it before I like build it up too much. So, reading, right? I like reading, but I never do it. And so I got to the point where I was like, when is the last time I read a book? Like, it's been so long. Am I even allowed to say I like reading at this point anymore? And I realized like I would go through spurts where I get like really into it and be like, all right, I'm gonna read, I'm gonna, be a reader and it's gonna be cute. I'm gonna like have a coffee or a tea and I'm gonna snuggle up on my couch. I'm gonna like read a book. as if I'm gonna read like an entire book in an evening. I don't, you know how we are. We're great. We're great. We have great imaginations. So I'd like get on Libby, which is my library app, and download a bunch of books. I'm like, all right, we're gonna do it. And then next thing I know, like I'm getting all these notifications that the books are expiring, and I was like, I never even started one of these books. And I kept doing that for like months. I was like, all right, I'm gonna get into reading. I just need to like do it. And I even did the baby steps for a little bit, right? And I had like, hey, I just got a real book, not on my app. And I'd put it like on my couch or, somewhere easy where I can find it next to my bed, right? And it would just be like sitting there. And I was like, okay, well, maybe like that's not the book I want to read. Anyway, moral of the story. Do you know what, when I actually started reading? I told myself I would read 5 minutes a day. And I was like, that's so dumb, Mary Beth. That's like next to nothing. 5 minutes, you can't even like, I'm gonna have to read the same pages over and over because by the next day, if I only read 5 minutes, like I'm gonna have to refresh and then it's just gonna be, I was like, 5 minutes is literally nothing. And so then I flipped it because I've been at this for a while, right? And I was like, well, 5 minutes is literally more than nothing. And if it's so easy and dismissible, then why don't I just do 5 minutes? Like, if it's going to be that easy, then just knock it out, right? And so that's what I set my goal is, as basically the bare minimum. So if I do the bare minimum, I hit my goal, and that works for me. And that I find that to be more motivating to get me to go above and beyond more often than if I do like a stretch goal and then and then I feel like I'm constantly missing my goal. It's all psychological. So know thyself, know what works for you. For me, having that easy where I know I can like check it off, it's literally 5 minutes. And I'm reading books on my phone. So I set the timer on my phone. I'm reading on my phone. Like I don't have to go get any gear. I don't have to be anywhere special. I don't, if I'm waiting in line, I don't have to worry about leaving my book at home and not having it, right? So it's just so easy. I have read more books in the last few months than I have in literal years. Like, I was in a book club with my sisters for a little bit, and like we were reading books because there was the accountability, right? But like we were taking our time, and just we do like a chapter a week and discussing it, and it was really great. But like that was the last time I was reading consistently, and that was years ago. And I kept meaning to get into it. And what finally got me into it was stupid 5 minutes a day. And I still have that reminder on my phone. And I've been doing pretty well. I do like 5 days a week. So if I miss a day, again, not a big deal. And then I don't get in that downward spiral of like, you're such a loser, you can't even do 5 minutes. Because sometimes you just need a day off. I think sometimes you just need an unstructured day. Anyway, we are getting off track. But I start with that story because I really want to paint the picture of like why I believe this works and it literally works for me and why I think it's important because that is what I'm talking about today. So when you are looking to take action towards your goals and maybe you haven't yet because you're like waiting for the right time or you keep meaning to and it's just not happening. Like whatever the situation is, I want to cover three things that have helped me out to actually like make consistent progress doing the things that I say that I want to do. So let's start with action. And the first one being like starting small enough to where it's doable. So I know it's not business related, right? But the 5 minutes a day for reading that worked for me. And I've literally been reading consistently now. Yes, it's a little bit at a time, but it's consistent. And I'm actually doing it. Like I'm getting through books. And then another thing that I was doing for a while is I would do Saturday morning co-working. And that accountability was really helpful for me, knowing that like I was gonna have my camera on. And so it's hard to scroll TikTok when you're telling a group of people that you're gonna be co-working and you have your camera on Zoom But if I'm like alone doing my own thing, it's like, oh, I'll do it later. I'm just gonna scroll TikTok for now, right? And then you just happen to never get around to it. So that I was doing Saturday mornings, and that was a chunk of time, but that extra accountability made it doable for me. And it was only once a month, which also helped. So my point is find something that's small, that's doable and then start there. So whatever the action is, right? If you're wanting to promote your business more on Instagram, if you're wanting to promote your podcast on TikTok, if you're wanting to start a podcast or do an email newsletter, right? Set aside a chunk of time for when you're going to do it. So either if that is one email newsletter a week, if that's one podcast bi-weekly, that's why I love my bi-weekly podcast, or a social media post 3 times a week, have that goal that's achievable, and then figure out like, okay, so am I going to work on this daily or or is this like a weekly thing? Because then that's going to tell you how much time you need to set aside, right? So if it's I'm working on my one newsletter a week, then you have, if you're doing 5 days a week or whatever, then you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long every day that you're working towards that. Or if it works better for you and you're like, Tuesday evenings are the time that I set aside to work on my business, and your goal is to knock out half a podcast on that Tuesday evening. So maybe it's recording it and doing the show notes, and then maybe the next week you're editing it and scheduling it, like whatever. So figuring out what your small achievable goal is and like how much time you're going to need to do that so that you can work on working it into your daily rhythm, your weekly rhythm and when that's actually going to fit. Because I know for me, maybe this is a person thing, maybe it's an age, I don't know. But for me, it's like I can set a goal and it can be achievable and I'll like have every intention of doing it, but it helps me so much more to actually do it if I really like actually look at my schedule and really consider when do I have the time? And for me, like when am I probably going to have the energy and when am I most likely to be in the headspace for that? Because I will tell you right now, like I've been off work for about 2 hours. I'm not going to jump right off work and be in the energy to like record a podcast with you. No, I vegged out, I ate, I scrolled on my phone, I took some time, right? Because that's what I need to be in the headspace for this. Other things like the gym, right? I need to go right after work, which I don't go on Fridays. We're recording this on a Friday. So I know that I need to go right after work because once I start like chilling and unwinding, there's no way in hell. Like, A, I'm probably not leaving this house. B, I'm definitely not leaving the house to go work out. Okay. So it's things like that when you're being strategic about like, where is this actually going to fit into my schedule? So what is doable? And then how can I make that work? So I want it to be small enough to where you can do it, whether it's weekly, daily, whatever, however often you're willing or wanting or able or need to work towards this thing. Make sure that your goal for that chunk of time is appropriate. And then doing it when you're anchoring it into like an existing habit. So for like the gym, I'm already working 5 days a week. I work corporate still. And so like that is my routine. It's very structured. It's there for me. I get off about the same time. And so I anchored my gym habit to my work routine. And so now I go right after work, 3 days a week. I know I have those times empty. And then I also, sorry, we're getting real in the weeds here, but also plan my weeks. So if I'm looking at my week and I'm like, oh, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I actually have something on Wednesday. And then I'll move my Wednesday workout to Tuesday or move the Monday to Friday. So that helps me too. If your weeks aren't regular, I take some time on Saturday morning, which again is another routine I'm working on. I take some time on Saturday morning and I plan that next week coming up. And so I'm able to see like, oh, I have my niece's birthday party or somebody has a softball game or I'm having dinner with a friend and she was available Tuesday but not Wednesday, so I'm switching my workout or whatever. Um but that kind of preparation can help you and the anchoring for me is really powerful. And a lot of these ideas like the anchoring and then a time and place to do the thing, I think it's Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits. Though I read both of them and they're so similar and there's so much overlap in my mind that I'm not even sure like which one came from which. But I'll put the links in the description. But Atomic Habits is James Clear, super popular, probably heard of it. Tiny Habits I think is less popular. But I also think the guy's a PhD. So it's BJ Fogg. Um, yeah, so like these main top bullet points. Excuse me. So great. Good thing I prepared for this, right? I didn't just jump in right after work. Okay, but the three main bullet points I got, I believe, like from those books. One of them, something I feel like I came up with by myself, and then I was like reading the book and I was like, oh, maybe I got this from the other one, and I like thought I came up with it. Who knows? So anchoring your new thing to an existing thing. So BJ in Tiny Habits is talking about how he was trying to get into the routine of flossing, right? And so he anchored it to brushing his teeth. Like he was already brushing his teeth, he was already in the bathroom, he was already there. And then to go back to my other point of starting small, he literally started with flossing one tooth. Like that was the requirement. Just floss one tooth, which is like crazy easy. And he gets into like the neuroscience of it. But point being is you make it easy, laughably doable is ideal, I think. And then you tie it to something you're already doing. So if it's after dinner, after breakfast, um, for me, I wanted to drink water in the morning before I started drinking coffee, and I know I'm going to drink coffee because I love my coffee. And so my thing was I have to drink some water before I start drinking coffee. And it was some days it was a sip, and some days it's a full cup. Like, but the requirement is some water. So a sip is enough, and I check that box because it helps me to not get overwhelmed and for it to not feel unachievable. All right. We're not talking about it being easy anymore. We're talking about anchoring it to something you're already doing. So if it's, I don't know, picking up the kids from school, like when the baby goes down for a nap, right? That's when a lot of moms will start cleaning or doing chores or whatever. And so you're using something that's already happening or something that's already part of your routine, and you're using that as like a trigger to do your new thing. So whether it is, I don't know, maybe after the gym, like that's when you sit down and you work on your newsletter, or maybe it's before you go to work, that's when you're getting up and you're working on your book, or maybe it's during your lunch break at work, like that's when you go and whatever you need to do to work on your business, right? So using something that you're already doing that is already part of your routine and using that as an anchor for the new thing you want to do can be super powerful and help it actually stick. And then on top of that, I want to encourage you, don't aim for perfect. Especially, I don't know if it's like the rejection sensitivity or it feels like an ADHD thing. I don't know. But I get so discouraged and it takes so much work for me to not like beat myself up. I'm doing so much better with my self-talk, but it's still like, okay, let me take that step back and like do an example. Even if you're like correcting and you're working on improving your self-talk, that still takes extra effort, right? So if I'm in a situation where I'm like, oh, I'm such an idiot, I messed up, like, I fell off the wagon. Even if I'm like, wait, I don't talk to myself like that anymore. I'm gonna come at it myself and with more like curiosity and gentleness, and be like, okay, that's okay. This happens. You're human. You're not perfect. Even if I handle it well, that is still taking energy and capacity and like energy. So if I can avoid that altogether, then I'm saving that energy to put into progress towards my goals and things like I actually want to do, right? So from the jump, I like starting with not even aiming for perfect. And that's part of why my gym routine is 3 days a week. My podcast is bi-weekly, not weekly. I'm trying to think like even my journaling is my goal is, well, it's 6 days a week now because I'm doing the artist way and it's supposed to be seven, but when it's just for me, my goal is 5 days a week out of seven. Obviously out of seven, I said a week. I'm so fun. Okay. Um, Point being though, when you're not aiming for perfect, you're giving more just leeway for life to happen. And then you're kind of putting a buffer between yourself and that potential spiral or falling off the wagon and then having to deal with what that means, like emotionally and cognitively, how that might discourage you and make it hard to get back on track, especially when you're first starting out. If this is a brand new thing, then yeah, you're not going to execute it perfectly. Especially if you're neurodivergent, you're probably going to forget all about it. There's been so many times when I scheduled time and I was like gonna start something new and okay, like I'm gonna work on my business on Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday nights or whatever. And then Tuesday night comes around and maybe usually what I do is I make dinner and I watch TV And I'm, an hour into a show, right? And you're like, an hour into a show, whatever. And you're like, wait, I was supposed to be doing something else. Sometimes you just completely forget about it, especially when it's new. So that is part of why I want to make sure that you're giving yourself grace and that you're not aiming for perfect. Like, don't set that bar so high when you're first starting out. Okay? And then celebrate. Celebrate when you do the thing, when you've hit that 3 days a week, or maybe even when you did it the first time. You, I don't want this to come off wrong, but to, this is gonna sound so bad. And I swear, like, this is why I think I'm autistic. Sometimes celebrating feels like another chore for me, and it's like another thing that I have to do. And I know it's good, and I know there's like psychological benefits, and like everybody talks about how important it is, and I'm working on it. And then sometimes, like, I just don't get it, and it doesn't seem like worth it, and it's like it just seems like a lot of work. Anyway, so my point is, if you're not a big like celebrate person, I'm right there with you. I'm working on it. I want to encourage you to work on it because they say it's important and that there are benefits. There actually are benefits. I have seen that. It's important to like recognize how far you've come. But what I do want to also encourage you is like the celebration is gonna, it's okay to make it what works for you. And it can look like what you need it to look like. It doesn't have to look like everybody else. It doesn't have to be popping champagne or balloons or like whatever you see everybody else on Instagram doing. It can be whatever, and it can be as, it doesn't have to be, the increments can be up to your discretion too. I totally believe. Okay. So if you need a little pat on the back, a little, gold star when you did it the first time, when you did it the first 3 times, when you did it the first 10 times, amazing. If you actually prefer to celebrate if you've done, 3 days out of a week or 5 days out of a week and you want to wait till like that week is over, great. But I want to encourage you to take that time to celebrate and recognize, like, hey, I started a new thing and I'm actually doing it. Like, I'm actually doing this new thing, especially as an ADHDer, probably all neurodivergencies, right? Incorporating something brand new into your routine can be really difficult because, first of all, like, and that's why I don't say habits very often because somebody was like, a habit is something you do without thinking about it. And there has like never been anything that I do without having to like get myself to do it. But I can build a routine and make it easier for me to do it and kind of build my day around where, all these pieces fit in. So, but adding something into your routine and getting yourself to do a new thing consistently is something worth being celebrated. So I want to encourage you to take time to celebrate and then also use that time to check in. So when you're checking in with yourself, for example, like I do my planning for the next week on Saturday morning, and it's also a good opportunity, I don't always do it, but it's a good opportunity to reflect on the last week and I ask myself like some check-in questions, right? Like, are the things I'm doing getting me closer to my goal? Like, is this working? Is this action? Is 5 minutes a day getting me towards my goal of reading more? And it was. I wasn't reading the same paragraph over and over. Like, I'm actually making progress in my books. And then, I asked myself, okay, do I want to increase the time? And I thought about that. And I was like, actually, no, I want to keep the requirement at 5 minutes so that it still feels easy and it doesn't feel like a burden. And it kind of feels like an opportunity to cultivate a hobby and less like a requirement that I need to like labor over. And so, but checking in helped me feel even more confident in keeping it at that, what's felt super silly, 5 minutes a day. And now I'm like, actually, that works for me. And a lot of the time, I'm reading a lot more than 5 minutes a day. And now that I do that in my routine, reading is much more top of mind. Sorry, I feel like this is a bad example because I love to like talk about business stuff, but this is my newest habit. Routine. So since I'm doing it daily, I'm actually thinking about my books more because before I would legitimately forget about them. And so it's more top of mind, and I find myself reading more throughout the day, throughout the week, after my 5 minutes. Sometimes I just go past the timer at that same time in the morning, And other times I'm reminded again, like later in the day, or like, oh, that was actually, I'm really curious to know like what that next section is. Like, let me get back into my book. So having that, incorporating it into your routine, especially in a doable way that it doesn't feel like a burden, actually kind of fosters the ability to want to do more of it and to make even more progress than your like minimum requirement. But that's part of why reflecting and checking in with yourself is so important because you want to ask, like, is this working for me? Maybe reading 5 minutes a day at night doesn't work for me, and I find myself skipping it and skipping it. Maybe 5 minutes is too long. Maybe I need to start with three. Or maybe doing it in the morning is better than doing it at night. And we're not going to know these things unless we take the second to stop and go, is this working? And if not, why? Because if it's not working, that's not a failure, especially something brand new. You're not just failing at it, there's a reason that it's not working. So you can use that as an opportunity to learn. When I was when I was starting the podcast, right? I was like, oh, but literally every podcast I can think of was weekly and an hour long. And I was really into podcasts at the time. I was listening to like three or four podcasts, and it just seemed like everyone's podcast was every week and an hour long. And for a second, like I thought that was what you had. I thought that's what a podcast was. I thought it had to be that. And then somebody, I think it was Kathy Heller, was adding on episodes, and she was doing like additional ones that were shorter. And then those were kind of sprinkled throughout, and she'd have like cute little themes on different days of the week and kind of like do little bonus episodes. And I was like, wait, and then the more I started getting into it, the more I learned just like researching and hearing about other people's podcasts that I wasn't listening to. You can actually have a podcast as frequently as you want. Consistent is good, right? Like, I don't want it to be random. Sometimes it's once a year, and other times it's, 4 times a month. But the consistently bi weekly, okay, yeah, so where it's consistent, even if it's not the same frequency as other people's. That's powerful. And so when you're checking in with yourself and you're asking, like, is this working? And is this getting you closer to your goal? And you still want that goal. This might be more beneficial when you're checking in, like maybe a few months down the road, right? But there's times when you're working towards something and you're doing the baby steps and you're kind of grinding away and you're doing it. And then you realize, like, is this what I want? Like, one of my friends was doing a blog based on her podcast for a while, and she had been doing it for a while. And then after a few months, I think it was a quarter, she was like, okay, I don't know if I still want to be doing this. Is it getting me closer to my goals? And so she was actually my client. So we were talking, and it was like, okay, well, what are your goals for the blog? And she wanted it to push people to her podcast and ultimately to her own coaching. And so at one point, when she was taking a step back and like, hey, is this working for me? Is this getting me closer to my goals? Do I still want to be doing this? She dug into the statistics and turned out no, it wasn't something that was really like paying off, and it wasn't something that she was really like getting joy out of. And so she let it go. And then she's gonna find something new and give that a try for a while. And a quarter is a great chunk of time, right? It's not like she, did one blog post and it didn't go viral, so she gave up. This is a difference between like checking in with yourself and seeing if something is working. But I know you know that, so I'm not going to harp on that. So reflecting, like, is this getting you to your goal? Do you still want that goal? Is what you're doing working? Like, is it working in your routine? Like those 5 minutes of reading, like, is this something you can do? If not, great. No judgment. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. Why not? Right? Are you not in the right headspace? Is it not the right time of day? Are you scheduling a task that requires focus during a time of the day when maybe you don't have focus, right? Maybe the kids are just coming home from school and they're running around and they're all high energy and chaotic. And that was when you were going to record your podcast, but now you have like screaming kids running around. That's not a failure on your part. It's just maybe we need to look for a different time of day to do that, or a different location, right? Maybe you can go to the library. Jenna Kutcher recorded her podcast in her car for a while. Maybe you can go to a podcast studio, like depending on what your vibe is. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It's an opportunity for you to find what you need to facilitate you being able to do the thing that you want to do. So sometimes you need to change the goal. Maybe the weekly podcast isn't sustainable. Sometimes you need to change the approach, right? Maybe you don't have an hour to record a podcast and it needs to be 20 or 30 minutes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Or maybe you can't write your newsletter all in one day. Maybe you're in different mindsets and you need to like write a rough draft, and then other times you need to edit, and then maybe you need to polish it or whatever. And so you might actually need to break it down and work on it over 3 different days. And then maybe you're even batching and you're working on multiple newsletters at one time, but you're drafting them all. And then you're proofreading them all. And then you're polishing them all on different days, right? Rachel Rogers was talking about at one point, I think it was on our podcast, where she'll do like in person, like people days, and then like admin work days. So she'll have, her meetings and podcast interviews and stuff where she's interacting, she's being like on and recording content and kind of do that, 1 or 2 days a week because that's a certain type of energy. And then she'll have different days a week where you're writing captions and you're working on your newsletter for your email, or you're working on your book, right? Some days you're going to be writing the book, and then other days you're going to be doing like podcast interviews promoting the book, and those are different types of energy. And so if you need different days or different environments to do those things, that is totally normal and totally like it's totally normal. And so it's important and powerful for us to take a step back and analyze that and be like, is this working? Like, do I want to do this? Are there better times of week or day when my energy is going to be a better fit for this? Okay. Um, such a smooth segue. I know I'm incredible. One of the things I do want to tag on too, like if it's not working, sometimes you just need more support. Sometimes you need more incentive. Sometimes it could be easier. Okay. I realized for a long time at the beginning of my podcast, I was like, I wanted to do an hour long, especially only being bi-weekly. I was like, well, the least I can do is an hour. And then I was like, this is kind of like a lot. Like, I don't even listen to hour-long podcasts all in one. Like, so who cares, right? And I value, oh, I hope you don't hate me for saying this. I value conciseness. And I know that I can get on a runaway train and like go down rabbit holes and stuff. So that's probably hilarious when you hear me say that. But I didn't want to get to the point. I mean, I had plenty to say, and I don't feel like it was a struggle, but I didn't want to get to the point where I was like trying to come up with things to say just to get the podcast to be an hour long. And so it was one of those things where it's like, okay, how can it be simpler? Or like for my social media content, well, one of the things right now I'm trying to allow myself to do and kind of focus on and give myself permission for is how can this be easy? How can this be fun? And so I have more of an incentive to do it and less pressure. Because if I'm struggling to do something, if it feels like a burden, or even with the reading, right? It's just 5 minutes. It doesn't feel like a burden because it's just 5 minutes. It feels so easy. It feels so easy that when I set that goal, I was like laughing at myself, like, this is pathetic. But guess what? It works. And I'm reading more in 5 minutes a day than I did for months before. So when you're looking at something and you're like, that's never going to work, it's too easy, or like it should be harder, like, does it have to? Like, what if it is fun? What if it was easy? And at least give yourself the permission to explore like what would that look like. Like if I showed up online and I was just kind of like playing with it and experimenting and seeing what things my audience likes and what vibes are, vibing, then cool, I'm just going to allow myself to do that. It doesn't have to be any certain way, especially if that's feeling burdensome for you. So like for me, the podcast didn't have to be weekly. It doesn't have to be an hour long. I was able to make it easier for me. And that has allowed me to be consistent with this for actually a while now. Like, I think we're getting close to episode 100, and it's been, I think, a couple years, which is impressive for me. Okay. To go from nothing, starting a podcast, and actually sticking with it consistently, especially considering most podcasts just like disappear after like 8 episodes. So Shout out to me. But if I can do it, you can do it. That's the reason I bring that up, is I'm not just patting myself on the back. I want to be an example that you can do this and you can make it work. And is my podcast the most professional, polished? No. But you're listening to it, right? There's always room for improvement, but there's also nothing wrong with, can I make it easier? Can I make it more fun? Or can I like incentivize myself to want to do it? Maybe you do need a shiny new microphone to get you to sit down and record the thing. Or, maybe you need to, I'm thinking of like incentives. I don't know, like take a trip after your 100th episode or something. I don't know. Just throwing that out there, right? But there's nothing wrong with working to make things easier or more fun or incentivize yourself to want to do the things, to get yourself like in the mood, to feel like doing the things that are going to get you where you want to go. Because it's like we want the end result, but so often we don't want to do the work. And so it's like, okay, well, why is that? It's not because you're lazy, even though you might have heard that your whole life, like I did if you're ADHD. It's not because you're lazy. There's something blocking you. There's some barrier there. Okay, so how can we take down that barrier? Right? If that's the only time you have to record your podcast and the kids are running around screaming, okay, can they hang out with the neighbors after school, once a week or twice a week or however long you need? Or can your spouse take care of the kids for that period of time? Or, is there a solution? Or, again, like we said before, maybe you can change the time of day you're doing it. Or maybe that's a good opportunity to let somebody come in and help you out. Maybe you hire a house cleaner so that you can work on your business. Maybe you get a service to do your laundry so you have time to work on your business. You're absolutely allowed to incorporate help and support and things into your life to make it easier for you to focus on the things that you want to do. Okay. So at the beginning, we were talking about like doing the thing and the action and like how to kind of build a routine, starting small, anchoring it to an existing habit, um, having it be like kind of realistic and work into your real life, and then celebrating and checking in. And then in that check-in, we're talking about taking that time to step back and reflect and ask, like, is this working? If not, how can I make it easier? How can I make it more fun or incentivize myself to do it? Or maybe I just need support to allow myself to be able to do it, to increase my capacity or take something else off my plate so that I have that. And then again, we want to focus on progress, not perfection. Progress, even if it's messy, even if it's slow, that's what matters. Don't go back and look at my beginning podcast episodes, but if you were, you can see progress was slowly made over those couple years, and I feel a lot more comfortable now. I use notes now, praise the Lord. I'm sure you appreciate that. Where I actually have like bullet points, and I actually edit a lot less. I went back and forth on policing myself and how often I say and I kind of let loose on that a little bit. And then I was listening to a couple episodes and I was like, girl, you say a lot. So now we're back to working on, if we need a pause, we can pause. And we don't always have to fill the silence with because nobody wants to hear that, and I'm so sorry. I am working on it. Point being, progress, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. The key is to keep moving forward, and that those small consistent actions, 9 times out of 10, that is going to be what gets you where you're going. And even if that doesn't get you all the way, that's going to get you to the point where you have a jump off point, right? That is the runway to where then you're going to be able to take off. If we're not building this foundation, if we're not incorporating things and doing things and having this, whether it's a body of work that you're able to take to an art show or a podcast episodes that you've done before that you're able to provide to someone who's looking, with a huge audience, who's looking to interview you but wants to get an idea of like what your vibe is and how you show up. If you didn't have the groundwork laid already, if you hadn't let yourself outline your book or think of the idea or develop a little bit of the characters to kind of explore it and play with it and have a fleshed out idea of what you want the book to be about, then you're going to have a hard time pitching it to somebody when you run into someone who wants to help you write that book or who wants to, I don't know, sponsor you. I don't know how the words work. Something like that. So that preparation, those daily routines, those baby steps that we're taking consistently, even though it doesn't look like a lot, especially not, at the beginning, that is how you're going to get to where you want to go. Because back to what we said in the beginning, I believe that even most overnight successes, you just didn't see them the days before because they were still small and they were putting in the work and they were making that progress baby step by baby step by baby step. And then they've done so much preparation and they're grinding away and they're doing all the things. And then some opportunity comes along and they were ready. We're not sitting on our couches waiting for the opportunity to come along, and then that all of a sudden transforms us into the person that we're ready to be to handle all that success. We're becoming that person through that consistency. That's what I believe, and that's what I've seen in my own life. So I'm not saying that no one can be an overnight success. There's exceptions to every rule. I am saying, in my experience, steady, slow, consistent progress is often what gets us to where we're going, or at least lays the foundation for that launching pad to take that big leap that might, that opportunity might arise further down the road. But in my experience, that doesn't happen at the very beginning. Okay. So I want to encourage you to keep chipping away at those things, building that consistency, working consistent progress into your routines. And then another thing I want to mention, sorry, I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, do we even want to get into this? Yeah, let's tag it on though. Being strategic about the actions that you're taking, which I think is especially important if we're running into lack of capacity, or time constraints or energy constraints, because there are, especially in business, there are a million things that you can be doing. You could spend all your time like in classes and learning and going through programs and not even working on your own business. You can spend all your time being told how to do things and not even taking the time to actually do any of the work. Okay? So my point is there's so much out there that you could be doing. That you could always be doing more. And if you're not doing more, then you could be trying a different strategy, right? And then you could be doing more of that. Like there, okay, you get it. So my point is, we get to choose what we're doing and what we're not doing. And this is part of what I'm so passionate about because I'm basically like an entrepreneur minimalist. There's actually a book, The Minimalist Entrepreneur, that I loved and I'm a huge fan of because I find myself having very low capacity for just like a lot of things, life mostly. And so that has helped me out of like kind of necessity. That has helped me be real kind of strict when I'm looking at things. I'm like, do I want to do that? Like my social media, in my mind, completely optional. Could I get more clients and like build my business faster and wider and, with more social media presence? Yeah, probably. But that's not what I'm focusing on right now. Okay. I'm prioritizing my podcast, I'm prioritizing my newsletter because these are the people who have an interest in what I want to say, right? I'm not just like spamming people. You either signed up to get my little love letters in your inbox on Saturday morning, and if you haven't yet, you can because I'm also doing reminders for new podcast episodes. So you can sign up at the link in the description and then you'll get the reminder when I do drop a podcast because it's not weekly and I know it can be hard to keep track of. Um, and then I'll remind you that a new episode dropped. But point being, I am prioritizing people who have like basically told me they want to hear from me, right? You're either subscribed to the podcast or you're looking it up or the email like you signed up to be on the newsletter. So I prioritize those things cuz those are my people. And that's a choice I've made. Other people, I'm not saying that it's bad to prioritize social media. I hope it didn't come across that way. But like, I'm not doing that. And so my point is when you're strategizing, if you don't have time and energy to do all the things, then you get to choose what you are doing and what you're not doing. And so, since you get to choose, you kind of have to choose, right? But since you get to choose, I want to encourage you to choose things that are going to make a difference in your business. Okay, because I see it's so easy for a lot of us, especially if you love shiny things, to get roped into rebranding or building a website or redoing your website or redoing your logo. And all these things are great and fun and but is that actually giving you the result you want? If you're rebranding because you want to get more clients, great. Is that getting you more clients? Or are we using that as kind of an excuse to avoid like actually talking to the people that we're meeting in networking groups, or maybe even going to networking groups, or reaching out to the people already in our circle and offering how we can help them? Like making that offer, explaining how we can help them. Because it's so easy with there's so much that we can be doing. It's very easy to get wrapped up in things that aren't actually making a really big impact instead of taking our precious time and energy and knocking out the couple things that are actually going to so corporate but move the needle in your business. So I want to encourage you, especially when you're doing that reflecting, you're like, is this getting me closer to my goal? Think, what are the things that are actually important in my business and what am I trying to do? Which usually the difference between a hobby and a business is making money. So usually that's making money. Am I bringing in new clients? Am I taking care of my current clients? Am I sharing with people how I can help them? And I would encourage us to prioritize those things over the Rachel Rogers calls it fancy busy work, you know, redoing your website one more time, or I'm hating on websites. I don't have a website. That's why. But, right, it's like, are you going to keep agonizing over the cover art on your book that's already good enough? Or are you going to actually publish it or or take the leap or whatever that move the needle action would be for your book? Okay, so to kind of recap, we are long today. Thank you for listening. To recap, do the thing, take the action, figure out something that's realistic to fit into your schedule, your habits, your week, and then take consistent small actions so you're making consistent progress consistently. So if that's weekly, monthly, daily, whatever that looks like for you, build it into where you're doing it and be conscientious to make sure it's something that will actually fit into your schedule. It's like a realistic goal. And then check in with yourself. Is this working? Do I want to be doing this? Is this getting me closer to my goal? Do I still want this goal? If it's not, what do I need? What do I need? How can I give myself that? Okay. And then be strategic about those things that you are doing. You don't have time to do all the things that you could possibly be doing. So, what do you have time for, and what can you prioritize that's actually going to make a difference in getting you to your goal? Because I want to see you get to your goal. That's what this whole podcast is all about, okay? Is realizing that you can choose your own goals and then you don't have to follow the path that was like magically laid out for you by everyone else in society who came before you. And then I want to see you make that shit happen because I absolutely believe that you can. And I think the world will be a better place when you do. Additionally, I think you're doing a great job and I'm super proud of you. And I want to thank you for hanging in with me because I think this is like twice as long as my last episode. Um, but I felt like all this stuff was good and I hope you feel that way too. If you do, if you don't, let me know. I'm always open to feedback. I'm at the Fierce Framework on Instagram and TikTok and my website. We hate websites. I'm just kidding. I don't hate them. Sorry. My email is confidence at thefierceframework.net. So I would love to hear from you. I will talk to you so soon. And until then, keep becoming fierce.